Nova Ethos, Ascension, Chapter 1, Awakening. Jackson stared blankly out the coffee shop window, the city outside a blur of movement, neon-soaked and indifferent. Hover trains whispered along sleek rails, glowing screens flashed endless streams of advertisements, but all he saw was his own reflection. Tired eyes, restless mind, adrift. His coffee, forgotten, had grown cold, just like everything else in his life. He felt utterly trapped, a prisoner inside an invisible box built by rejection and his own silent surrender. Years after graduating, each hopeful leap he'd made had ended in failure. The echoes of countless dismissals still haunted him, especially the last one, burned deepest of all. "We appreciate your time, Jackson," the interviewer had said, the memory painfully vivid. "But you're just not a good fit. You lack direction, purpose, conviction." The words still rang in his ears, sharp and unyielding. He believed them. A newsfeed flickered silently on a nearby screen, screaming headlines that mirrored his inner chaos. Unemployment surging, society unraveling, trust in institutions collapsing, violence erupting amid hopelessness. His jaw tightened. The world mirrored him, directionless, drifting, crumbling from within. Then she walked in, and everything shifted. Aiko entered the cafe like a lightning strike, decisive, purposeful, impossible to ignore. Heads turned subtly as she moved, as if the universe itself recognized a superior gravitational force. She radiated something Jackson couldn't name, something profound yet indefinable, a calm, relentless certainty, a presence both gentle and fiercely powerful. She noticed him immediately. "Jackson, right?" he fumbled, startled that she remembered him from that forgettable party months ago. "Yeah. Hey." Aiko sat down opposite him, her movements graceful yet bold, her eyes piercing. "You look lost." He shifted uncomfortably, his defense rising automatically. "Is it that obvious?" "Only if you're really paying attention," she said softly, compassion in her eyes. "Why did you stop believing in yourself?" Jackson froze. A sudden flashback pierced through him. The moment it all fell apart. The job he desperately wanted, the hiring manager's calm, brutal words, "We just don't see you fitting in anywhere." That single sentence had shattered his confidence, silenced his ambition, buried his dreams. "I guess I stopped thinking I could actually change things," he confessed softly. "Everything I do ends nowhere. Maybe the world just isn't made for people like me." She studied him carefully. "That's exactly why you're stuck. You've accepted a story someone else handed you. A powerless story. But the world isn't fixed, Jackson. It's waiting for people who dare to rewrite the rules." He looked up, skeptical yet intrigued. "You sound like you've cracked some secret code." "No secret, just principles," she said quietly. "Have you ever heard of Nova Ethos?" Jackson shook his head slowly. "It's a system," Aiko explained, her voice becoming clearer, more impassioned. "Adaptation instead of stagnation, structured growth instead of chaos, understanding probabilities rather than fearing uncertainty. It teaches you how to shape your life instead of just reacting, how to own your destiny." "Sounds idealistic," Jackson muttered. "I'm barely holding on to reality as it is." She smiled faintly, calmly pressing on. "That's because you've only known how to react, not act. You're letting someone else's vision define your worth." Jackson glanced back at the TV. The news footage now showed angry protesters, violence flaring, hopeless faces, real consequences of a generation without purpose, without direction. The chaos was palpable, immediate. He shivered, suddenly understanding how close he stood to becoming just another statistic in that grim reality. Aiko placed something gently on the table, a small, softly glowing emblem. Jackson leaned closer, instantly transfixed, an infinity loop enclosed in a circle, shifting gently, pulsing with a subtle, almost hypnotic rhythm. As he stared into it, the loop seemed to speak directly to his soul, reflecting back everything he'd feared and every possibility he'd forgotten he could reach for. In its gentle radiance, he saw clearly the path he'd abandoned and the future he could still reclaim. "Nova Ethos is this," she whispered, tapping the glowing symbol gently. "Continuous adaptation. Structured growth, moral clarity, self-sovereignty, probabilistic mastery, reality engineering. It's not theory, Jackson, it's lived truth. A truth anyone can create." Jackson hesitated, shaken by the rush of longing suddenly ignited within him. But doubt crept back quickly. He recoiled, voice barely audible. "I'm not like you. I can't just become something better." Before she could reply, commotion broke out in the street outside. Two men fought viciously, fists flying, faces twisted by anger and desperation. Passers-by scattered, screaming in panic as sirens wailed closer. The brutal reality of chaos, unstructured, uncontrolled, pressed urgently against the coffee shop's glass walls. Aiko's gaze hardened, sadness and conviction intertwined. Look outside. This isn't just news footage, it's reality right now. People surrender power, institutions crumble, despair grows, violence erupts. This chaos is what happens when no one dares to shape the future. She reached across the table, softly gripping Jackson's trembling hand. Her touch was grounding, electrifying, undeniable. You think you're nothing special, she said fiercely, leaning in closer. But the truth is, you're exactly what the world needs. You're broken, but only so you can rebuild stronger. Nova Ethos isn't for those born powerful, it's for those who choose to reclaim their power. That's why I chose you, Jackson. I see the hunger beneath your pain. Jackson's breath caught in his throat. Her gaze was intense, piercing through years of doubt. But what if you're wrong? Her grip tightened gently. What if I'm not? What if this is the moment you finally step beyond fear and find your path again? You can remain trapped in someone else's story, or you can write your own. Nova Ethos is the pen. He looked back to the chaos outside, then again at the infinity loop, pulsing softly in the space between them. In that moment, something shifted deeply inside him, a fragile spark of hope rekindling beneath layers of resignation. Aiko rose calmly, her certainty radiant. You're ready to try. Meet me tomorrow at Nova Corp. Let me show you what's possible. He stared into the glowing loop once more. This time, its infinite possibilities seemed within reach. He didn't fully understand it yet, but he felt its call. Deep and urgent, irresistible. Heart racing. Jackson nodded slowly. I'll be there. She smiled knowingly, turning toward the door. In her wake, the cafe seemed brighter, warmer somehow. As she stepped into the neon-lit streets, Jackson realized everyone else around her faded like shadows against her radiance. Nova Ethos wasn't merely a philosophy. It was something Aiko embodied so completely that her very presence changed the reality around her. And for the first time, Jackson began to wonder if he could too.